on, everybody? It's Manny here, back again. Got a brand new video for you guys. I'm going to discuss with you what are the best possible plays for us at running back this week in week 3 of the NFL. But before I get started here at DFS Zone, I appreciate you guys drop a like on the video. Let's try to get 50 likes on this video. We'll greatly appreciate it. It shows me your appreciation for what I'm doing to help you guys out as best as I can every single week. All right. Also, if you're new to the channel, you haven't been here before, definitely want to subscribe down below and put on your post notifications if you want to be able to get every week the best possible information regarding positions in the NFL. And also, we got the NBA we're covering as well very soon, within a month. That will be everyday information to you to help you with your lineups every single day and through the NFL in its entirety, the whole entire season. And I also have a 1 week, every week on Saturday nights, I do have a live show for the NFL where I would discuss any game stacks, team stacks, any injury reports. We'll discuss the implied totals, what are the best possible plays, what are the best teams to target, so on and so forth. On top of, go over more than likely whatever other possible good plays have come up for us during the course of the week, monitoring injury reports and any changes by coaching staffs during the course of the week will be discussed as well. You name it, we will discuss it. I come together as a community. I love doing that. I want to be able to have you guys become a part of the DFS community here at DFS Zone. So please come on down, join us on Saturday nights, and let's discuss the NFL slate every Saturday night. That's at 7 o'clock. You don't want to miss that, so definitely subscribe down below and make sure you put on those post notifications. All right. Running backs. Earlier today, I came out and I gave you guys the quarterbacks that I think I'm looking at, that I'm looking to target, as well as which games I'm looking to get players from to target. And I did also mention to you that the quarterback position this week, I kind of like on paying up a little bit. I normally don't pay up at quarterback. I usually try to get a mid-tier play. I will have a lineup or so that I think I'm going to definitely pay up at some quarterbacks, because I think the combination of quarterback with the receivers this year are going to definitely be crushing it big as far as matchups this week. Really be able to get a lot of fantasy points. And of course, on DK, those PPRs really come into play, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. So I think with running back, like I mentioned earlier today, I think we can actually pay down a little bit at running back. Now, granted, there are some great plays here at the top at running back, and by all means, there are players that you can choose here. I'm just going to fade away a little bit on these guys just for the sake of the video, to give you guys a couple different other options that you may want to look at that you probably are not really trying to look at. If you understand what most people are not going to be targeting these kind of players, but I think they're in a pretty good situation where they can actually do well for their teams and actually do well for us as DFS players. So first things first, we have Todd Gurley here. Obviously, Gurley's in play. Alvin Kamara is probably the best possible play out of the two, being $600 cheaper. I mean, I'm not going to go too much into it, but he's going up against Atlanta, and Atlanta's always had trouble with dual threat backs, especially backs that are great receivers out of the backfield. I mean, thus far this year, they have had 37 receptions against them, 170 yards and 2 TDs, and well, they have had 37 rushes, 170 yards and 2 TDs, and they have had 24 targets, 18 receptions, and 124 yards given up. But the most interesting number is that they have given up 32.2 DK points and 26.2 FanDuel points to running backs, and obviously that 32 comes into play 5 or 6 points higher than FanDuel, is due to the PPR, those receptions. And Kamara definitely gets a lot of touches. This is a guy that gets about 19 to 20 touches a game between reception targets as well as rushing attempts. So definitely someone to consider here in a matchup against Atlanta, which should be an interesting close game in a dome stadium. Other than that, what I'm looking at, Melvin Gordon obviously still definitely in play. DJ, well, you just can't play DJ. I don't advise anybody to play DJ. He's not going to be highly owned, but he's in a, the team has just been really horrible as of late. Hasn't played well all year long. So definitely David Johnson is someone you should not consider. But we come down here, obviously Elliott and Barkley could be consideration. Hunt definitely. But I really like here 7,900, and he's still pretty pricey at DK, and that's due to the PPR potential. Obviously DK knows that. They have DK. Christian McCaffrey at 7,900. I definitely like here as a dual threat back in this matchup against Cincinnati at home in Carolina. He is 7,800 on DK. Okay. Which is still pretty pricey. He's one of the top running backs there as far as price is concerned. But I love him here in his matchup. Thus far this year, 18 rushes, 87 yards, 43 yards per game. His receiving yards, he's had 24 targets, 20 receptions, 147 yards, and 73 yards per game. So he's definitely catching the ball and running the same amount of yardage that a pretty decent receiver is going to get. 83% catch percentage. So, I mean, he gets targeted a lot there, as you can see from the 24 targets, and he's had 20 receptions. So not many missed balls or drop balls by McCaffrey. Last week, he had 8 rushes. We're going to get here. He had 8 rushes, about 37 yards. Yes, he did. And he had 15 targets, 14 receptions, 102 yards. Only put up 20.9. But on DK, that was 30. He had 30.9 on DK. That's 10 more points, and that's due to the PPR. And that's what I really like in this matchup, is that he has the potential to get a lot of receptions from the backfield against Cincinnati. I mean, you know, this is a kid that last year, 8 times last year, got 17 plus. So he does have an upside. That will be obviously better than his average right now after 2 games. So I definitely love the upside. In the red zone, not much to really talk about there. He's had 4 receptions, 7 yards in the 20, and within the 10 yards, he's had 3 receptions for 6 yards, no touchdowns. That's the only drawback. He has not gotten a touchdown this year, but he is very close to getting that. I believe that this is a game he can possibly do that at home in Carolina versus Cincinnati. Cincinnati comes in. They are 3rd in rushing defense, so they're really good at rushing. Their rushing defense has been solid this year, but again, that was only 2 games, and for one, and the other key point is that was against Indianapolis and Baltimore. And when you start thinking about Indianapolis and Baltimore, and you're thinking about who Indy has in their backfield and who Baltimore has, they don't have a dual threat back with this kind of potential and this kind of upside in Christian McCaffrey. And this offensive line is pretty good because Carolina comes in here. They are actually 5th in rushing offense in the league right now, averaging 134 yards a game, and this gentleman right here has not yet to break a big rushing game. This is a combination of all their players contributing here in the rushing department, and they're still putting up 134 yards per game. So I think just that point there is very, very critical in this matchup against Cincinnati. But Cincinnati pretty good thus far, 70 yards per game only and 1 touchdown. Running backs have had 36 rushes against them, 111 yards, 1 TD. They have been targeted 23 times, 18 receptions for 145 yards, and they've given up 24.8 DK points and 20.3 FanDuel points to running backs within the 2 games per game. So that is pretty good. Those are pretty good fantasy point numbers, and we have a kid here that just put up 20.9 last week, as you can see here on my screen, and he is capable of putting 17 plus, which he did 8 times or better last year. And he did that all, as you can see here, with no touchdowns yet this season. So imagine, he put 20.9 and 30.9 DK points last week, and he didn't even have a touchdown. So obviously he's have even more upside to possibly get a touchdown and increase those fantasy point numbers. So I definitely love Christian McCaffrey here. Also in the red zone, this team, Cincinnati, 66.6% of the time the opponents have gotten in the red zone, they have scored. Okay, so that's pretty good. Another thing that I also saw that was pretty interesting is they've given up 26 first downs to their opponents per game. That's the 3rd most in the NFL, Cincinnati. So the teams are moving downfield and chucking and taking and getting a lot of first downs on this team. And this is where I believe Christian McCaffrey, with not only his running game, but his explosiveness as far as being a receiver, is going to make it very difficult for Cincinnati to not only neutralize Christian McCaffrey, but also Cam Newton, who is also a very good mobile dual threat quarterback. So again, like I said, man, I really like all these numbers. The opposition also against Cincinnati have had 2 touchdowns per game on average thus far within the 2 games, and that was Indianapolis and Baltimore, which I mentioned before. So I definitely like the offensive potential here of Carolina versus this Cincinnati team. So I definitely love Christian McCaffrey here. A little pricey on both areas, but I do like him here. He has a lot of upside. Next guy I like is Leonard Fournette, going up against Tennessee at home. Obviously, we know he only played 1 game, and that was game 1 against the Giants, and he left like probably in the first few minutes of the game. He had 9 rushes in that game for 41 yards. He had 3 targets, got all 3, and got 14 yards. Put up 7 fantasy points in minimal amount of minutes because he pulled a hammy, and he felt something there, and they got him out, and they did the right thing. Last week, he was a game-time decision, warmed up and everything, and of course, they decided not to play him. It was the right thing to do. They went out there and crushed New England without Leonard Fournette. And this week, they got to go up against Tennessee. Tennessee's got to go up against them. And we were talking about offensive line and a running game of Jacksonville, which was one of the top maybe 7 or 8 offensive rushing teams last year in the NFL. And Fournette only played a few minutes so far this year. So he's going to come out and ready. I expect him to play. Right now it still says questionable, but we'll see as we go. It's only Tuesday. We'll see if he practices tomorrow and Thursday. And if he does, I think he's a lock for a big game here. He's 7,700 here and only 6,900 on DK. So I really like those numbers. And yep, 6,900 right here, Leonard Fournette. In 2017, just to give you a recap, he had 268 rushes for 1,040 yards, 9 touchdowns. He did average 80 yards per game last season. He also had 36 receptions, capable of being a pretty dangerous dual threat back as well. He's pretty good at receiving the ball and handling the ball. 302 yards and 1 touchdown. Inside the 20, red zone. This is 2017 stats because obviously we have a very small sample for him this year. 29 rushes, 53 yards, 7 TDs in the 20. Inside the 10, he was just as efficient. 17 rushes, 25 yards for 7 touchdowns. So that means all 7 of his touchdowns were all within inside the 10-yard line. He has definitely upside. 16 plus points last year average for the season, and he had 520 plus games last year as far as fantasy and when I say 20 plus, that's fantasy points per game last year. So he has definite upside here. Going up against Tennessee is 26th in rushing defense so far after 2 games, and they're going up against the 9th best offense of rushing team in the league right now, and this is without Leonard Fournette playing more than 10 minutes this year. So it comes to show you how good the offensive line is. Pretty good at moving the ball in the line of scrimmage and making things happen for the running back. So imagine they're going to get their star back, possibly their star running back this weekend. I really see Fournette wanting to have a massive game here, and I think he has the potential to do that. Cincinnati, as the 26th ranked defense in rushing defense, they've given up 134 yards per game on average. The one positive you can take out of out of Tennessee is they have not given up a touchdown yet. They've been good in the red zone as well. The opponents have been there 3 times and they only gotten a field goal, so 16.6%. I think that will change because, again, their opponents that they have had, the opponents that they played against, let's see, who did they play against? They played against Miami and Houston. Those games were against Miami and Houston. Miami and Houston do not have the offensive line and the running game that Jacksonville has. This is a team that went all the way to the AFC Championship game last year, only, a game away from the Super Bowl. They are a very, very good team, and so far this year they've done just that, going 2-0 already. Tennessee versus running backs, 44 rushes against them, 213 yards, 0 touchdowns, like I mentioned, which is pretty good. They've had 6 targets only, 5 receptions for 20 yards. That is pretty good, that defense in their part. But again, that was against Miami and Houston. Now they're facing against, again, like I mentioned, and they've been pretty good in the red zone. But I still, again, Jacksonville comes in averaging 22. Another thing that I notice here that I like also is that Jacksonville comes in here averaging 22 first downs a game. 22 first downs a game, and this is without their lead running back. And that's in the top 10 in the league to start off the year, which is fantastic. So I really, really, really like those numbers. And they're going in, again, like I said, they're facing a team. Tennessee is facing a team that they have not quite faced as of yet this year, that caliber of a team. So with that, I really love Leonard Fournette in this matchup. The next guy I'm going to discuss is right underneath him is Jordan Howard. Now, I know a lot of people are not going to talk about Howard, but Arizona's been horrible. You got to target Arizona, or at least look to see what their numbers have been. So Howard comes in 7,400 in this game. And on DK, he's 6,500. And where is he? Right here. It's right underneath him. 6,500. Numbers have not been spectacular for 2018. 29 rushes, only 117 yards. He's averaging 58 yards per game. He's due for a nice game because 58 yards per game is really, that's definitely low for him. Receiving yards, he's had 9 targets, 8 receptions for 58 yards, so he's pretty much a 92% catch percentage. And he's averaging 7.3 yards per catch, 58 yards a game. Last week, he had 14 rushes, 35 yards, and he had 4 targets. He had 3 receptions, 33 yards. Only 8.3 fantasy points against Seattle. The week before that against Green Bay, 15, 82, 5, 4, and 25. So, he's definitely below his average. He's averaging 10.8. But Looking at him a little bit further, he had six 16 fantasy points or better games last year. So he has upside to get you 16 to 17. He's capable of getting a 1 touchdown a game. All right. Last year, he also had 7 touchdowns in the red zone, which was pretty high. Was in the top 10 as far as running backs, as far as touchdowns. So he was very, very efficient in the red zone. We don't have much to say this year. He's only had 3 rushes for 13 yards in the red zone. So it's not a whole lot, very small sample. But again, the upside is there with a 10.8 average fantasy points and 12.8 on DK with a potential of getting 16 or better. He's had some 20-point games as well. I definitely like Jordan Howard here against this really poor Arizona defense. Arizona 28th in rushing defense this year thus far. They have had 65 rushes against them for 256 yards and 4 touchdowns. Their opponents have been averaging 136 yards per game. Receiving yards, 14 targets, 11 receptions, 164 yards on 11 catches, 1 touchdown. DK points, 44 DK points. 44 and 40.8 FanDuel points. That's crazy. In the red zone, they've given them 9 rushing first downs, which is the most in the NFL. And they have given up 2 rushing TDs per game. This is Arizona, which is tied for the most for the league with Buffalo and Tampa Bay. The opponents are scoring 70% of the time in the red zone. They have had 5 opportunities, the 2 opponents they have faced, and they have scored 3 touchdowns and a field goal. So all this looks more and more intriguing, and I gave you Mitchell Trubisky as the quarterback, and here I'm throwing you Mr. Howard as the running back. I think normally you don't pair up running back and quarterback, but at the same time I will probably have one of his receivers in my receiver video tomorrow. But I really like Chicago in this game against Arizona. I mean, Arizona's going to have to prove to me that they're going to get it right defensively, and right now they're very, very poor. So again, I love the numbers against Arizona, so I definitely think that Mr. Howard is a fine play. So I pretty much gave you 3 guys right there. I think, most importantly, I wanted to give you minimal guys, and I want to find some players that had some opportunity and some upside, and they were not that expensive. You don't have to pay up at running back this week, but again, like I said, Gurley is in play, as well as Mr. Alvin Kamara. I do have 2 other possible value plays that I like down here that I've been considering. I'm definitely looking at Adrian Peterson as a possible play here against Green Bay. Green Bay definitely struggle a little bit at running back. Obviously, you can also consider Mr. Lindsey. I'll look in further in that matchup against Baltimore, but I believe Baltimore is a pretty good run defense team thus far. Giovanni Bernard is going to get a brunk of touches this week, now taking over, obviously, for Mr. Mixon. But coming down a little lower, Matt Breida is definitely someone to consider here. And I think I skipped my other guy. I definitely, you know who's another guy before I go any further down? He is right here. Kenyan Drake. I think Kenyan Drake could be a possible sneaky play here. Oakland has definitely had their troubles with running backs thus far this year. They just gave up over 100 yards to Mr. Lindsey, which I just spoke about. But he's at 6,800. I think the price is okay. He's definitely priced better at DK, Mr. Drake. I think Mr. Drake is someone to consider. Where is he? Kenyan Drake right here, 5,600. So far this year, 25 rushes, 101 yards, 1 touchdown. He's had 8 targets, 7 receptions, 35 yards, 87% catch percentage. His last game out, we're going to click on him right now. I think he had 11 rushes, 53 yards, 1 touchdown against my Jets. 4 targets, 4 receptions, 17 yards, have 15 fantasy points. So he has a 11.6 average right now. He did have 17 DK points, and that's due to the receptions, of course, because you get 1 point per reception on DK, which is always great. I wouldn't consider him a dual threat back, but he's definitely dangerous in the backfield when he is able to get out on the outside and get those check-off throws as well as those screens. So look out for Mr. Drake in that capacity. But he's $1,400 cheaper on DK. I think at DK he's definitely a nice little price there. You know, in the red zone, he's had 4 rushes, 12 yards, and 1 touchdown. Inside the 10, he's had that 1 rush, 9 yards, 1 touchdown. So that means in the 20-yard line, he's been efficient. in the 10-yard line with that one rush, 9 yards, and the TD. He's going up against, real quickly, against Oakland, 31st in rushing defense, have given up 54 rushes for 308 yards and 2 touchdowns, 154 yards per game. The only good positive out of it is that Oakland has not given up a touchdown yet to a running back, 0. So that's the one thing you can take out as a positive for Oakland, but they have had their troubles thus far, and they gave up 107 to the young kid the other day. Like I said, 46 rushes, what I have here. Also, 11 targets for running backs against Oakland, 7 receptions, 72 yards. That's probably a little bit more than 10 yards per catch, 1 TD, 29.4 DK points, and 24.6 FanDuel points. And you're talking about a person here that had 17 last week on DK and 15, has the potential to get you 16, 17. So I think he's in a pretty decent matchup and an opportunity here to probably produce some points. So definitely a little sneaky play, Mr. Drake there. The other guy that I'm thinking that could be a possible sneaky play is Mr. Breida. Mr. Breida, Matt Breida, only had 11 carries last week and 4 targets, 3 receptions for 21 yards, had 23.4 DK fantasy points. He's 6,200 here, and he is $5,400, $800 cheaper. Right below Mr. Drake is Mr. Breida. And he had 27.9 DK points last week. 11 rushes, like I said, 138 yards, 1 rushing TD, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 21 yards. He's been getting about 13 to 15 touches a game, so that's not too bad. In the red zone, he hasn't had many opportunities because San Francisco hasn't had many opportunities. They've been in the red zone 4 times, and they only have had 1 touchdown and a field goal, only averaging 33.3% efficiency from the red zone. So they definitely have to improve there. But they're going up against Kansas City, and Kansas City, Kansas City, granted, Kansas City is 7th in the league right now in rushing defense. So they're not poor in rushing defense. Their problem is the passing, and this is where I think that if Garoppolo and Coach Shanahan could really put up a good game plan, they should be able to use Matt Breida in the backfield and be able to get him out in checkdowns and get him out in the slot and make him a receiver as well, where they have been the opponents have been very effective with Kansas City in that area. Kansas City has been shutting down the run as of late. I mean, they've been pretty good. They shut down Mr. Connor last week. He only had 8 rushes and 5 receptions. Again, let me just double check that. They didn't shut him down. Obviously, Pittsburgh fell behind by 21 points, so they had no choice but to throw. But Mr. Connor wasn't as effective even receiving the ball off the backfield. So I still think there's a possibility here. It's someone to consider. I'll know a little bit more if I really want to go that route, but I figure it's someone notably to mention here that could be in a possible good spot here as a check down slot receiver as a back this weekend versus Kansas City. That's pretty much it. I went back to Kansas City. 21 receptions out of 25 targets by running backs. 261 yards, 1 touchdown in 2 games. In 2 games, they've given up 261 yards. That is crazy. But again, those 2 games were against 2 very good offensive-minded teams. Probably 2 of the top 3-4 offenses in the NFL as of last year in Pittsburgh and the Chargers. These teams really love to throw the ball a lot, and they definitely have great dual threat backs. Pittsburgh, obviously with Connor right now, but normally with Le'Veon Bell. And then, of course, the Chargers with Mr. Melvin Gordon. So that's the reasons why. Breida does not fall into those categories with those guys, but he's capable. I seen last week the explosiveness that he may have. If they can get him between the tackles and do very well and open up the doors also to put him in a slot position, check downs, a couple screens, he could be pretty effective as a receiving back this coming week in the matchup against Kansas City. So those are guys that I think that you should consider. Obviously, all the other ones that I mentioned, and of course the 3 that I think are very good plays and very good value as far as price. That's pretty much what I have for you at Running Back Man. Drop a like on the video. Like I said, I would love to get 50 or more likes on every one of my videos. I appreciate you guys. If you have not subscribed to the channel and you find that the content is something of value to you, please subscribe down below, and do not forget to put on your post notifications. This way you do not miss any of my uploads. And of course, like I said before, I have a live show every Saturday night. I would love you guys to come and check it out. Come with us and sit down with us for a little bit as a community of DFS players, and let's discuss the slate a little bit further. But you must subscribe to do that. And other than that, if you want to be, if you do NBA DFS, this is going to carry on. A month from now, I will be doing those videos every day, and possibly 2 or 3 times a week, live shows before lock. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. And if you definitely have an interest in NBA and as well as the NFL content throughout the rest of the year, definitely subscribe down below and put on those post notifications. Other than that, I'll see you guys back the next time. Wide receivers up next, and after that, the tight ends. All right, so look for those videos very shortly. Have a great night.